correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Good evening.
And we have a very special guest. And like always, when we have a very special guest from the network, we let them go ahead and introduce themselves and the podcast that they run. So we want to welcome Dustin from Staggering Dragon.
Hey, everybody. This is Dustin from the Staggering Dragon podcast and Guardians of the Wills, if you listen to that back in the day. But yeah, we just released our latest episode today, actually, or last night, I guess it was.
I listened to it this morning.
Yeah, you did. I was impressed. You must have got up, and that was the first thing you did is listen to our podcast.
I start work at 6 o'clock in the morning.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But yeah, we our latest podcast, we talked about our lake weekend where we all were nerds in a house for 3 days and played Call of Cthulhu, and it was awesome.
Take a drink.
But that's right. We had enough of those that weekend.
Hooli has suggested that there should be a Me and Steve drinking game, and one of the reasons to take a drink is whenever we mention Call of Cthulhu.
Well, yeah.
Every time Call of Cthulhu is mentioned.
I love Call of Cthulhu.
It's a great game.
It is.
Yeah. We're having a blast playing it right now. It's like going from I went from like playing Saga Edition Star Wars, that's the D20 based system, and then going to the FFG Star Wars. It's like a breath of fresh air because I'm really bad at math and I didn't want to do math anymore. And now I can just look at symbols and it makes more sense to my brain. And we get to, have all the big narrative scenes and everything. And I think Cthulhu is that, but even a step further, because there will be hours that go by that we don't roll any dice.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. We're just all sitting there telling a big story. And that's what appeals to me anyway.
Yeah. Well, no. And Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu is it. And you talked about this on your episode, but it really just, it's a completely different approach. And when we talked to Jay Little, I don't know, was it a month and a half ago, Steve? Something like that?
Yeah, roughly.
That came up and he said, yeah, I think I think Genesis could do that, but Call of Cthulhu is such a different animal in the first place that like you don't necessarily need the narrative dice in it, or maybe you don't want them because
they might get in the way. Like,
because you're intentionally, as he put it, you're giving up that preservation aspect of your character.
Right. Yeah. It's weird because it's almost like, you make these characters in, a fantasy RPG or Star Wars or whatever. You might put a little bit of yourself in it, but you're never going to be Han Solo flying the Millennium Falcon. As much as I want to be, I know I'm not going to do that. But when you play Call of Cthulhu, my character, he's a doctor. He's just a regular old guy. And that's what I think is cool is you're not a superhero, you're just a regular old person that is going through some serious stuff and seeing some stuff that you've never seen before. And how can you mentally deal with that? That's like the essence of it, I think.
Yeah, I have been quietly working on figuring out stats and how to do it, but I'm working on building a class for actually Delta Green that is just like skeptical podcaster.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, I just like, I want to build like, not that this is a great example, but I want to build like an Alex Jones type podcaster for Delta Green, where it's like, what do you do? Well, I look into things, and then you're like trying to tell people, and Delta Green just doesn't care because you're crazy.
One of Neil's characters was he was a con man, and he pretended to be a psychic. Like he didn't believe in any of it, and he pretended to be a psychic. And the ironic part is like half the stuff he was telling people is actually he's coming to find out is actually true.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, speaking of that, and speaking of you know,
Unexpected twists and
unexpected
turns.
twists, that's the words. Let's talk about some unexpected twists and turns. So we brought you on because you're sort of a, well, I wouldn't say, I don't know.
You're a
Maybe-
self-admitted agent of chaos.
Yes.
You could say that.
You said it in your episode that dropped this morning. So,
Yeah, there's some truth to that. Yes.
but yeah, we figured, we wanted to talk to you just because we wanted to talk to you, and this seemed like a good topic to bring up because, like, listening to, be it your G.I. Joe or your Star Wars actual plays, it seems like your table is very prone to, as Steve likes to call them, shenanigans.
Oh yes.
As Steve likes to call them. Yeah.
Yeah, we like to so this group of guys that I've been gaming with, we've been gaming together for some years now, and we've gotten to that point, and you can tell in our live plays that we have that we all we're always on the same wavelength. That, we kind of all always know what each other's about to do, or what should be funny at this moment, because what we like to do on the show especially is laugh. I mean, we want to be silly and have fun and do some crazy stuff. And the Genesis and the Star Wars rule sets, I mean, really lend themselves to that open, that freedom of just doing whatever you want. Like, I don't have to look up on some kind of table and try to find out what the stats are of a chair that Neil's character decides that he's going to throw across the room at somebody.
Right.
Improvised thrown weapon.
So it just lends itself to that narrative quality, and like Neil said, it's setting a scene and everybody picturing that in their head, as opposed to, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but everybody likes what they like, but I felt like a lot of times when I would run Saga Edition, I would have a map out on the floor and it would be a picture of what the room was. And so you've already put in a box in somebody's head of what this environment is. And I feel like a lot of people are like, well, that's what's here and nothing else. Like, if I wanted to blow open this vent and have hot steam come out, I don't see any vents on this map, so I can't do that. Whereas, with Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars, and Genesis, you're not putting people's imaginations into a box. It's just, what can you come up with? It's almost like, I think everybody that we play with has such a good imagination, and you have to have a good imagination to play the way that we do, that you can just come up with stuff off the top of your head and throw it in there. And then when a game and our players do that kind of stuff, I have to be able to roll with it and put that in my head of, the picture that they've just painted, and it just snowballs on top of itself sometimes.
Well, yeah, and that, like I think you're saying, for you, a lot of it just comes from the familiarity. But yeah, that does it. Just makes I agree with what you're saying though, because like you said, sometimes having the map there, well, some people need that as a concrete reference. It also becomes restrictive because subconsciously you look and, well, that's on the page that we're using, so it's there. This is what it looks like. It's not, well, hey, is there a chandelier, hanging above the guard standing in the middle of the entryway? And obviously that doesn't work for Star Wars, but you know what I'm saying. Well, maybe
Right.
it would, but anyhow.
Yeah, I think that's, so to get off on the maps maybe a little bit. When I use maps, I try to make them as absolutely vague as possible. Like, here's the shape of the room. this is the important thing you're worried about, and then I'll leave all of the other details out. Because that way my players can look at it and go, well, is there a chandelier? Yeah, there's a chandelier over the thing. Or is there a vent here? Yeah, why not? There could be a vent there. I don't see why that's a problem. But yeah, I agree that like the vagueness is what allows for that to, like, I say vague, but the openness allows for maybe rolling with chaos a little bit more. And you know a thing or two about rolling with chaos coming from someone who listens to Stag Drag. Like
Yeah. It's almost like sometimes we try to one up each other each game that we end up playing or each session that goes by, you know, like I was saying on our podcast that just came out, Nate and I like to sit there and we kind of like to let it marinate for a little bit while Gary's running the game, and then one of us just kind of looks at the other and we're like just kind of a little head nod, and it's like, yeah, this has gone too normal so far. Like, we need to do something crazy right now to just get the ball rolling, because when we do that, then everybody else that's playing starts doing the same thing, and then that's when it gets really fun. That's when, all hell starts breaking loose, basically.
yeah, it's time for the squirrels to go on parade.
But like your crew does this in a way that somehow still, despite being gonzo, doesn't just turn into a one-up fest. Like, I don't know, like the thing that popped into my head was, I believe it was Nate in the G.I. Joe one. Was he playing? No, Nate was playing the ninja, right?
Nate was silent but deadly.
Yes. Okay. The whichever one of them was that was playing the wrestler dude, and he had the ring square.
That was Neil. Yeah. Yeah, that was Neil.
That had to have come out of left field.
So I knew about it beforehand. He told me about it beforehand because he was like, well, actually, before I get into that, I will say that the one thing that we all do, we don't just throw crazy stuff out there that doesn't make any sense to the story. We try to throw stuff out there that, yeah, it's crazy, but it makes sense with what's going on. I mean, the story is still the main thing that we're trying to do or trying to tell. As far as Neil's, his character's name was Neckbreaker. He was a ex-professional wrestler that was hired by G.I. Joe to fight Cobra. And he came up to me before we played and he said, I have this idea. Is this okay? And he told me what it was, and I laughed my ass off. And I said, yeah, that is awesome. But none of the other guys had any idea that was going to happen. And that's some of my favorite points in those live plays, is listening to everybody genuinely laugh their ass off when something like that happens.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And I think maybe that is that you think one of the keys is kind of having that sort of relationship where maybe two of the people at the table are in on the curveball, but the rest of them aren't.
I think so. I think it just goes back to that thing that we've been playing together for so long, and we all know what makes each other laugh, and for the most part, it's all the same thing because we're all pretty much the same person. But you've been playing with each other for that long, you start to get tendencies. You know what somebody is thinking or what somebody's going to do sometimes, and stuff like that happens. And like I said, our main thing is to do stuff while we're recording to make, hopefully, whoever's listening to it laugh. And then, like the weekend at the lake a couple weekends ago, we weren't recording. We do everything to make each other laugh because, we're going to do something crazy, and it just, that's just how we like to play. And I know some people like to play super serious, and that's totally fine if that's what you want to do, but we like to just sit down and have fun, and laughing is our number one goal.
Well, that makes sense. And having listened to what you guys put out, the 2 campaigns so far.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it is, and you can tell you guys are just genuinely having fun, and you guys, that's your bit, if you will. But I wonder too, like a lot of times, the old adage is no campaign ever survives first contact with the players, and that's kind of talking about curveballs, but in kind of a negative sense.
Hmm.
And so I wonder, you know, given the amount of, so to speak, planned good experience you have with dealing with curveballs, maybe, do you have any thoughts as to what to do if maybe someone throws a curveball that is derailing the campaign or something like that?
Um, I think I've said this before on our podcast, and if you haven't listened to it, I'll tell this story again. I was at Gamer Nation Con 4, I think, when Katrina Ostrander was there, and she's written for Star Wars and L5R and a bunch of other stuff, and she was the guest of honor. I sat down and I wasn't playing. I just asked her. I said, "Hey, if when you're running this one shot today, do you care if I just sit in and watch?" And she's like, "Yeah." And the way she set the whole thing up really opened my eyes to everything because I had been coming off playing Saga Edition for I don't know how many years we played it, but everything was pretty linear. And the way she ran everything was she basically came up with an environment and then everybody just kind of played in it. There was no like, set thing as far as I mean, she may have had it in her mind, and I'm sure she did, as far as things she wanted to get accomplished, but there was no order. There's no specific order. And Hooley's talked about the same thing. You have like 3 or 4 things that you want to have happen, and it doesn't really matter what order those things go in, and you basically let people play in your sandbox that you've created, more or less. And that's kind of how I approach stuff. And so when somebody throws me a curveball, if I understand the environment well enough, they can throw me all the curveballs they want, and I know how that would affect what's happening in this environment that we're all in right now. It if I know it well enough or I've written it myself, then there's not a whole lot that they could do to totally derail something. But I'll tell you what, the second, I think it's the second episode of our Star Wars live play, that was 100% off the cuff. They got arrested by the Empire and were put into Imperial custody. I had no plans of that happening at all. I didn't have any of this written down. I assumed they were going to fight their way out of the situation because that's what they usually do. It's like if there's an opportunity for Neil to pull his gun out and start shooting, that's what he does. And he didn't do it. And so they got arrested, and I had to wing the whole thing of them being in a jail cell and trying to get out, basically. So sometimes it just comes down to you just gotta all the episodes of Star Trek you've watched or all the episodes of Battlestar Galactica or whatever it is that you've watched, I'm sure are subconsciously in there somewhere, and you can come up with something, or I generally can. There's been times that I've had to be like, okay, look, let's take like 30-minute break because I got to figure out what to do. But for the most part, we just run it on the fly and just see what happens. And with Star Wars and Genesis, those guys tell me the story more than I'm telling them the story. I'll just throw them in the environment, like I said, and let them play, and they tell me what the story is more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wonder if, and not to tangent too much, but I think that's maybe a strong point of that system in general, is just having the players tell you the story. Because I ran a one shot, well, like last week, and just sort of rolled with the punches and was able to, like, because my players made a left turn and I was like, okay, well, we're going this way. It's a completely different way than I'd planned on. And by saying left turn, I don't mean like, oh, well, they just made a left when I wanted them to make a right. I mean, like, Steve was there. They had some awesome rolls, convinced a guy that they weren't supposed to convince, and ended up where it's like, well, good luck now.
Yeah, we ended up walking into the bad guy's office instead of being dragged there, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. They walked in and the bad guy's like, huh.
But like,
So
so kind of what I'm hearing though, like, is it's like it's a combination of being ready to pull something out of your butt, and also kind of the Brett Bowen told me, it's the quantum ogre theory of you have this thing, so if they go off in a direction that you weren't planning on them going, you just put the thing that you had planned where they're going anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. It's the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
It's like you can either go down road A or B. It doesn't matter what road they go down. There's still this thing that I have planned is still going to happen no matter what. But you give them the illusion of choice of, making a decision so they feel invested in it, and then that happens.
all roads lead to Rome.
Well, that was kind of a listener question. Well, it was a listener question. I just rephrased it and kind of spread it out a little bit. But I have another listener question, and this one I think is maybe a little more in your wheelhouse. And this is, what do you, those moments when the player throws you that golden curveball that you just take your notes, chuck them over your shoulder, and lean in. How do you set up to just yes and keep that excitement and that tempo going?
Well, that's a good point. Is the keep the excitement and the tempo going. I'm kind of like Hooli in that I want to have everybody's attention all the time, because I feel like if somebody's looking at their phone or something, I'm not doing a good job. I'm not holding their attention. And yeah, when somebody throws you a total curveball, it's like you got to have your poker face on sometimes and act like, yeah, I had this planned the whole time. When in your mind you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? But a lot of stuff, especially Star Wars, and I've played Star Wars so much that I I know the environment of Star Wars so much that, I mean, we could do anything. If they could do anything, and I feel like I could come up with something. I've told them before, and I've thought about doing this on a show, is nobody has any plans. Let's all just sit down at the table, and in 10 minutes you tell me what in Star Wars we want to play, and let's play it right now.
Mhm.
And just run it, because I feel like I know Star Wars and I know the system well enough to where I'm confident enough to where I could do that.
That could be, I like that idea. It's scary to me as a GM, but some of that is because I'm probably not as versed in Star Wars as you are or whatever, but I do like that idea, and there's a trend now in the indie scene too of making games that are kind of designed on that premise. Maybe not that 10-minute, you know, spitball session and play, but that collaborative world building and go.
Well, isn't
Mhm.
that, I mean, not to interject too much here, but isn't that the whole point of Powered by the Apocalypse?
That's a lot of it.
Yeah, when you do character creation, you figure out the like actual game you're playing, or like the kids on bikes type stuff where it's, everybody gets together and we figure out this is what we're playing, this is the campaign setting.
Yeah, and Hooli did kind of the same thing before at one of the cons. I can't remember which one it was, but he basically would sit down with a group, and in an hour everybody comes up with their characters, and then he'd take like a 30-minute break, come up with a story, come back to the table, and let's go. Let's play it. We just came up with it, and they did. And it's fun to watch stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. And like, I think, I think that if you're comfortable enough as a GM to do that, I think that's probably very freeing, because you're just as surprised as the players. You're having as much fun learning what's happening as they are.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I mean, that's why I love doing that. I like for fun to write stories, and I almost feel like it's cheating when I sit down to write a story, because I'm the only one that's coming up with what's happening, and it's never going to be as interesting or as crazy as it would be with five other people sitting at the table and everybody throwing in their ideas, as opposed to just you, trying to
Mhm.
tell somebody something.
That was always the thing that got me, is that like it was always fun to me to run games and then ask my players like the next session, be like, all right, does anybody want to recap what happened? And they tell me things and highlight things that I thought were just minor details, but they were like, oh, and then this guy did this. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure he did. I mean, yeah, he did it, but like, I didn't make that a big deal, but okay. I guess it is now.
Yeah, the things that people sometimes latch onto, you're just like, I didn't even like that was like a sentence I threw in there for flavor, and now this guy's like an accomplice in a murder.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that you're right. Yeah, listening you're just listening to your players, but it's paying attention is the key there. But you talk about and I said daunting as far as just kind of, sitting down to do something, but I just remembered Steve and I played a Cyberpunk 2021 shot. Geez, what was that? 2 years, 3
2
years
years
ago
ago.
now? And we were missing a couple of people that week that our group was getting together. So it's like, well, I'll run a one shot. Well, then life went crazy and I had no time to plan anything out. But I knew Steve had made a character. And so I made a couple of quick pre-gens and the idea that I literally came to the table with to run this one shot was Steve's character was well, I'll let him explain it, but he was a corp. Okay. But his company ran these and for whatever reason, I was thinking of like the cyberpunk kind of punked up equivalent of Monster Energy, right? So they run these vending machines that are through the city that sell, and these machines are getting jacked. And so he's got to go find out what's going on. And that was literally all I had. But we had
Yeah.
a blast with that game.
Steve's character was a corp that wanted to be a solo and basically just masqueraded as Batman. At night,
Well-
he's like running around like da, 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 and he's terrible at his job. It's
And then we had the actual solo who was making My Little Ponies out of his plastic explosive.
uh-huh. Then our fixer got ran over twice.
Oh, because he shot the guy driving the van that was coming at him.
That's true. His instinctive reaction was not to dive out of the way; it was to shoot the guy driving the van at him. That game was fun.
Yeah, it
That
was.
sounds awesome.
I miss playing 2020. Anyways, that's a different tangent. I that's the game that really truly got me into RPGs. So it's like for me, that's like my bread and butter. My ideal game is a 2020 game. Speaking of which, another Patreon question, just to ask you a softball. What's your favorite system?
Oh,
why?
my favorite system.
And why? Yeah.
I mean, if I was gonna have to choose, it'd be Genesis, and for the reasons I said, it's Genesis is as much as I talked about in Call of Cthulhu going a couple hours without rolling any dice or anything like that. Genesis, you can get crunchy with it if you want to. I mean, or you can be, totally narrative with it. It's just however you want to do it, and it's so versatile and flexible. It works with anything. I mean, all you have to do is reskin stuff and go, which, I mean, you can do that with a lot of stuff, but Genesis just lends itself to that actual, the style that I like playing.
Just does it better. It just
Yeah, exactly.
It's a combination of the dice and the fact that it's such a narrative focus. And there were some little genius bits in the design where, it's intentionally designed so that you aren't thinking about the probabilities of the dice. You're just going, oh, this makes it a bit better. This makes it a
Yes.
lot better.
Yes.
So it takes the math out of your brain.
Yeah. I mean, it was such a breath of fresh air going from Saga Edition to FFG Star Wars when I didn't have to sit there all week before we were going to play and come up with a bunch of bad guys that mathematically, had to make sense with, the level that the PCs were at and all that stuff and pull my hair out. And then I'll throw in 14 talents for this guy to basically be at the same level as my PCs. And then, when we're playing, I forgot that he had these 13 other talents. And, it's like, how many pages of a bad guy do I need on the table? And Genesis is it's just like there's the adversary talent. End of discussion.
Wow, yeah, but it is. It's just like I really, really, really like Genesis. I'm not to the point where it's the only game I want to play. And in my head, Genesis and Star Wars are the same game. I know they're
Right.
not, that there are some subtle differences, but the narrative dice, I think, is what I really like about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're the same dice, they just don't have copyrighted symbols on the Genesis or trademark or whatever the appropriate legal blah 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 term is.
Yeah, it comes down to the Force die, and then in Genesis, if you're going to run magic,
Yeah.
which Genesis kind of streamlined that. You could, and a lot of people have talked about and ran Star Wars using Genesis rules, and you can absolutely do that with using the magic rules instead of the Force rules. But either way, you sit down to the whole point is to sit down and tell a story. And if you're not doing that, you might as well play a skirmish game. You might as well play like
Mhm.
X-Wing or something like that,
Well, now here's a thought. Do you think, just because I know we have a lot of listeners that are into the narrative dice, do you think the narrative dice encourage more curveballs, or do they create them on their own, or is it just more based on your players?
I think it's a little bit of your players for sure, but I think it also I think there's a definite like inherent railroad situation that you can have in the old D20 system that isn't there in the narrative dice system, which will cause naturally curveballs. So, I could see, just kind of depends on the type of person you are and the type of game that you want to play or what you're used to running or what you like to do. But, you know, you can have everything written down exactly and you have your players go through it exactly that way without any curveballs. But Genesis is kind of more like I was talking about with Katrina's game. It's like, here's the environment and I have this handful of things I want to have happen. Go play, you know?
Well, yeah. I think part of it is Genesis, by the nature of having your players have to come up with, how do we spend these advantage? What do we do with this triumph? It
Hmm.
makes them engage more creatively with the story. It forces it. And so
Yeah.
I think that inherently, probably because you're actively engaging their creativity, is maybe going to cause more curveballs, but because everyone's in on it, it might not feel as much like a curveball. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it just, it kind of naturally, has those things happen. But like you said, if everybody's in on it, if everybody is contributing to the story, and your players are telling you, the crazy stuff that's taking place instead of you, you know, you're not forcing them, but sometimes you feel like you're getting railroaded sometimes, if the GM says it. If the players say it, then yeah, everybody it's like an automatic buy-in for everybody.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to, like the one question was, that throw your notes away. Well, maybe it isn't really making you throw your notes away, but if your players think it is, then they're all excited.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you just, sometimes you just got to have that poker face, like I said, and just sometimes act like, oh, I planned this all.
Well, and I think sometimes Genesis with the dice results lends itself to curveballs. Like you sort of expect players, you start giving dice that'll either give triumph or despair, and you sort of expect you have to plan for a triumph or despair. But
Hmm.
occasionally it's like, oh crap, they just rolled a despair. What's gonna happen now? Like or
We will
yeah, go ahead.
we sit at the table and we want we want those triumphs and despairs. We want them so bad. And even if it's a negative thing, even if it's a despair for the PCs, we all want that to happen because we all know that, that's going to take the game in just a totally different direction than what we were, you know, that we already had in our mind, the preconceived notion of what we already had thought was going to happen, and that despair comes up and everybody gets super excited. They get excited about the despairs as much as they get excited about the triumphs, I think.
Oh yeah,
At least
yeah.
my guys do.
I get excited for despairs because I want to know who's going to lose a limb.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
the guillotine falls, and oh no.
So I have, and this is, and I don't want to. So if you haven't listened to Stag Drag's GI Joe game, stop us right now. Go listen to that because I'm about to kind of throw a little bit of a spoiler that comes out about halfway through the game.
Please come back. Don't just leave and go listen to that and then never come back. Just pause and then come back. We'll still be here. I promise we'll still be here.
But I want to know, were you at all in on the character sheet swapping? And you can fill in the story because I got to be honest, I haven't learned your players' voices enough to quite know who's who exactly anyway, but
Yeah.
that just made me laugh so hard when I found out about that.
So that was Gary and Stu. They played twins. They played identical twins. And no, I was not in on the character sheet swapping. I had no idea. I had so many other things I was worrying about at the table. I had no idea that they were swapping character sheets. And so yeah, the bit was oh gosh, what did they say? Something like, "Oh yeah, well, you know, you might think that because we look alike, because we're twins." And that was the trigger for them to switch character sheets. And I had no idea that was going on until about halfway through. I started to catch on to it because I would say, "Well, didn't you go do this?" And they're like, "No, he went and did that." I'm like, "I'm pretty sure you did, but I've been drinking a lot and it's been like 3 hours, so I might be wrong," you know? And later on they totally out of left field. I had no idea that was happening, and it was they pulled that off really, really well. I guess I should say.
And I don't know, to me that was when I started thinking of Curveballs, that was the one that just stuck in my head.
Yeah, that was a definite curveball.
But they pulled it off so cleanly. And then, like, now that you say it that way, where you were going, "Oh, wait, wasn't it you?" And then they would say the line.
Yes. Yes. They're like, "Yeah, I know how you would think that, or I can see how you would think that, being as that we're twins,
And then papers would change.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
now, did they both have copies of both sheets?
Well, it was funny because if you go back and listen to it, no, they only had one sheet per character. And there was one time, if you go back and listen to it, where one of them got confused as to which character he was because he tried to do a leadership check or something like that, and he's like, "Yeah, but I'm not real good at it." And the other one's like, "Yeah, you are, brother. Yeah, you are." he's like, "Oh yeah, I am. I'm really good at that."
Oh,
So yeah.
I'm terrible. What? Yes, you are. What? I was just looking at that. Hold on a second. See, that's what
Yeah.
I would be going. Well, give me your character. I want to look and see.
Yeah, with those guys, I give them like, an idea that I have, and they make their characters, and I generally trust them enough to where I don't even look at their character sheets because I know that they're going to, calculate everything right because we've been playing a million times. But yeah, then stuff like that happens. Like, I had no idea that was going on.
Now you're looking at them going, do I need to look at your character sheets? Everybody write your names at the top of your character sheets.
But, like, at the same time, to me, that's like you were talking about where you're trying to make each other laugh. And
Yeah.
so they had to be having a hell of a time keeping a straight face across the table at each other.
Oh yeah. We thought, I mean, we had no idea. Like nobody else knew at the table that was going on either. We were all oblivious to it.
Yeah, my poker face is bad enough. I'd be sitting there giggling. Like, what the hell are you giggling at?
I mean,
Oh,
everybody's just sitting around and laughing, at everything that's going on anyway, that we had no idea.
but yeah, that to me, that was just like I said, that was the king of curveballs that didn't really impact the game at all.
No, it added to it, I think. I mean, it just the voices that those guys came up with, like everybody's character in that game was amazing. They did a really, really good job.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, well, Steve and I, every time we, do you guys as the podcast, we bring that up, and it like because as Steve put it, and you guys so clearly got GI Joe.
I am a huge GI Joe fan. Like, I have the toys, I read the comic books, all of it. Like a huge GI Joe fan since I was a kid, and that was always something I wanted to do. Was when Genesis came out and start thinking of all the crazy games you could have. GI Joe was definitely at the top of my list.
I just liked how it just had that cartoony feel, but at the same point, it was very clearly that you guys are playing this, so to speak, in the memories of, your 12-year-old selves playing with Duke and Wild Bill and Crazy Legs.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it was, have you seen the Futurama episode where Nixon is watching the Saturday morning cartoons and they have GI Zap?
Yes.
I have not, but
That is what it was. That was like, one of their one of the Hermes code name was like Waterboard. It's
Yeah.
like that's what we did. We basically turned that into a role-playing game.
Well, it felt like, and I'm gonna say this, it felt like early Robot Chicken. Like when they were like, it felt like early Robot Chicken, and I mean that in the best way, because like later Robot Chicken's sort of mean spirited, but like early, it felt like, oh well, yeah, we genuinely care about this, and we're dorks and nerds and all this stuff, and we just want to have some fun, and that's where I picked up on that with your guys' GI Joe. I'm like, oh man, this is just something that these guys, really like GI Joe. They know how to get the feeling right. Like, they're doing a better job than those terrible movies that came out. Like,
Yeah, we're not going to talk about some of the GI Joe movies that have been released.
my buddy used to call them the Power Ranger knockoffs. But yeah, no, it just was. I absolutely adored your GI Joe run, and you guys run a great podcast. I'm just not gonna lie. Like,
Yes.
you guys run a great podcast.
And I
Thanks.
have to say, and I told you this when we were messaging earlier today, part of me is slightly disappointed that you didn't record your Call of Cthulhu, because I would love to hear you guys play it. But I understand too, the volume of the adventure that you're playing is so huge,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the time it takes to edit actual plays. I mean,
Oh,
that's a
it's
game
grueling.
that would literally take years to play.
Right. Right. There's some stuff though too that when we play when we recorded GI Joe, we just let it all fly. And I was really honestly, I was worried, and I messaged GM Chris and I was like, "Dude, will you listen to this and make sure that you're totally fine with some of the stuff that we're saying on here?" And, he listened to it and immediately replied back. He's like, dude, he's like, you got to release that. He's like, that is hilarious. I'm like, okay. But when we play by ourselves and the mics aren't on, there's stuff that said that there's probably some people that are going to get offended, or they don't really need to hear that, or they'll think it's too gross or whatever. And it makes us laugh, but probably shouldn't put it on a podcast.
Oh, that's fair. I mean, I think that's really the case with anybody's private tables,
Yeah.
on some level.
Right. Right. Yeah. We have an idea that we've had for a long time for a role-playing game that we would use Genesis as the core set, that we're pretty sure would I mean, the amount of people that would get offended by it would be a lot. But hey, I mean, as long as you as long as people are talking about it, maybe that's okay. I don't know. I don't want to talk about what it's about, because if we do actually do it, I want it to be a surprise for everybody. But
Oh, that's cool. All right. Well, so now that we've talked about this and that, let everybody know where they can go to find Stag Drag and any other way they want to try and digitally stalk you or whatever else it is that you'd like them to do.
yeah, so Staggering Dragon, thestaggeringdragon.com. You can find all of our episodes. The Guardians of the Wills episodes are on there too. We got a bunch of different ways. stagdragpodcast@gmail.com if you want to just email us. We have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter handle, stagdrag, and we're on Instagram. So, and then of course the D20 Radio Discord server. You can always get a hold of us that way too.
Cool, cool. All right. You got anything else, Steve?
No.
All right. So it is then time for Game of the Week.
Game of the week.
Hey, what the hell's Game of the Week? Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right. Dustin, you told us you understand how to play Game of the Week. So what order were we going in this week?
Heck, I'll go first. Mine's nothing current.
Okay.
But it's current to me. If you don't mind, I'll just go.
Go for it.
So we were, like I said, down at the lake a couple weekends ago, and we had played Munchkin many times before, but I was at Half Price Books like the week before we left, and they had Marvel Munchkin. And I was like, oh, that'd be fun. So I grabbed that. We played the crap out of that. So like, at midnight or 1 o'clock, when some of the guys were, they were done and they had to go to bed, the rest of us played Marvel Munchkin till like 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's kind of, it's fun because I'm a huge comic book nerd and I love Marvel and I love all the characters and everything that are in it. But it's kind of weird because you're shield agents, but the game is you're fighting against each other. And that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Shouldn't you be helping? And I know you can help people in Munchkin, but the goal of the game is to beat everybody. And I thought that was kind of weird that everybody was shield agents and not cooperating against the bad guys all the time. But anyway.
Yeah, I think the setup to that is that your shield agents buying for a promotion, and that solves that problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now you're
Right.
you're all fighting for the same promotion, and
I like that.
Yeah. It's been years since I played Munchkin, but I remember it being very fun.
oh, I love Munchkin.
It's
I got-
a yeah.
Box of Munchkin Panic sitting over here that I haven't even opened that I found somewhere cheap.
I got friends that I had a friend that was messaging me one time. He's like, I want to get into role playing games. I'm like, you play Munchkin all the time. He's like, that's not a role playing. Yes, it is. Like, all you have to do is start acting like your character in Munchkin. And so we played a game that way, and he's like, oh, I get it now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was.
Oh.
I love that game and had the Marvel skin on it, so I was all in. It was super fun.
Yeah, like I said, I think it fixes that problem if you just sort of go, all right, well, we're all shield agents, but we're buying for the same, trying to get to the same promotion.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And so you're just
like
throwing
that.
each other under the bus.
Yeah, well, but that fits, like you said, that fits Munchkin, and it sounds like that would make it all work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That game's so fun. That game is so fun. Well, do you want to go next, Steve? Because I want to make sure that me and you didn't pick the same game.
Well, I have two different ones.
Oh, geez. All right, we'll go.
Wait, am I going or are you going?
You're going. I'm not
going. All right. Well, then I'm going to go with, and I don't think I've used this before. I'm going to go with Orbital Blues.
Oh, good. Okay.
Which is, it actually just came out last August, but it's it's designed as a space Western RPG. It's the rock and roll future of yesteryear that never was and nobody wanted. So I'm seeing this as, Cowboy Bebop, maybe some shades of Firefly, that kind of stuff. It's actually based on the rule set from Best Left Buried, which is a real simple D6 system with only 3 stats, which in this case are muscle, grit, and savvy. But yeah, it just looks like a real fun kind of, it calls itself a lo-fi space western game. So I mean, it's like, it's a love letter to offbeat sci-fi, vintage music. Like I said, to me, this strains of Cowboy Bebop or Firefly or
Yeah.
Mandalorian. But if you're gonna do Mandalorian, why would you choose Star Wars? But anyway,
That sounds awesome. I like that. That checks off a lot of boxes for me.
yeah, and if you're interested, the PDF on drive-through is only like 13 and change. So
Okay.
that's mine.
I have a game, and when I saw this, I was reminded of, okay, so you're both older than me, and in the early 90s, late 80s, there was a bloom of not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles clones, okay? Meaning that games or shows like Samurai Pizza Cats or stuff like that was coming out. There was one specifically called Biker Mice from Mars.
Okay.
Okay. Are you familiar at all with Biker Mice from Mars?
No, I am not.
No.
Okay. There is a game called Heavy Metal Thunder Mouse, which is about a biker gang of mice and their motorcycle clubs. And I saw this, and my little 90s brain went, ooh. And it runs off Fate. It is an episodic, it's a game that works best for episodic or can do long campaigns. But yeah, you and your friends make mice, found a club, and hit the streets. These mice with gusto to build their own motorcycles and set off into an intimidating world where they are outsized but never outclassed.
Nice.
That sounds fun, and maybe this just ticks off how twisted my brain is. But I now want to combine that with Hell Knight.
Oh, yeah, but this is wholesome.
Well, that's true.
This is like Hell Knight is one thing, and I love Hell Knight because it's really cool and really dark, but this is wholesome. This is like I said, when I saw this, I immediately thought of Biker Mice from Mars because it seems like the kind of game that you could play as like a Saturday morning cartoon. Like just with the episodic play, you just every day or every time we play this, it's a different story. We tell it in a couple hours and we just have some fun and do some shenanigans, and we play mice that are bikers, and it's fun.
Oh no, it does. Yeah, it will. Yeah, no, that could be. I would play it. Who am I lying to?
Yeah, you would play it. You would play it. You would play it and then also be like super geeked out and tell us about your bike and be super detailed about it, because me and you are cut from the same cloth in that we're both like minor motorcycle nerds.
I only have 2 in my garage. Well, no,
Yeah.
one's on the back porch, the other one's in the garage.
Exactly. You're riding like some Suzuki chopper that you built, and I'm riding like the most amazing Honda Goldwing ever created. Like,
Yeah, I could go off down a tangent there, but
yeah, Heavy Metal Thunder Mouse. Check it out.
that does
It's
sound fun.
$10 for the PDF, and like I said, runs off Fate, so it's should be a fairly simple game. Like Fate's fairly easy to pick up.
Yeah, I think so.
After I actually ended up reading some more Fate, and yeah. But yeah, with all of that being said, we want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fun.
We enjoyed having you on and chit-chatting. And for those who might have joined our recently started Patreon, there probably will be an outtakes episode of us talking about one of Dustin's favorite things for half an hour or so.
Yeah.
Right on.
So that'll be coming out. As always, links to everything are in the show notes. And with all that being said, we want to thank you for listening. Get out there and play some RPGs and be kind to one another.
Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
I'm hearing shit, okay? Just
Are the voices in your head loud again?
they're getting there.
Oh, I got to tell you what Neil did at our lake weekend a couple weekends ago. He jumped in the lake,
Oh, nice.
and it's like, I mean, we're in Missouri, and it was 10 degrees outside, and that lake had been getting cold for quite a few months. And he's a big dude. I'm a pretty big dude, but he's bigger than me. And I was like, man, you jump in that lake, if you start to drown, I'm not going to be able to pull you out of there. Like, you're going down to the bottom, man. But yeah, he full on, there was a high dive on the dock, and he full on jumped into the lake.
Hey, let me tell you something. We have we need an outtake for the Patreon, so let's go ahead and get into it.
Here we go.
Okay.
Oh God, this could last a while.